your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News Weekend Edition with Jeanette Roche.
Hello and thanks for joining us. Today we begin in Lethbridge. Saturday morning, as in many other Canadian cities, citizens of our southern Alberta city gathered together to express their desire to have all COVID-related mandates and restrictions lifted immediately. A convoy of vehicles was staged in the parking lot of Superstore on Mayor McGrath Drive. One of the promoters behind the event, Larry Shilley, says he hopes this rally gets the attention of our local politicians.
I'd like to see local politicians get a backbone. I believe Rachel Thomas has stood up for the rights of Canadians and the right to protest and supported this movement. I'm not sure about our UPC candidates. They've been pretty quiet, but I think they need to get a backbone. The party's over. Time to move on.
My dad was a Second World War vet. He served with the Grey and Simcoe Foresters out of Ontario, and yeah, he fought for these rights and freedoms, and that Charter of Rights is there for a reason, and that's to protect us and all people, all Canadians, right? And he would have been severely disappointed, let's say that.
A checkpoint blockade on Highway 4 leading to the busiest border crossing in Alberta appears to be growing. Protesters have cleared one lane in each direction to allow cross-border traffic to get through, but about 80 rigs remain along the highway in the Coots protest against COVID-19 restrictions. They have been joined by dozens of trucks, farm equipment and SUVs, and even horses sporting Canadian flags. Here's an image from a Freedom Convoy showing that trucks left Edmonton this morning to meet up with the rally in Coots later this afternoon. This just shows the scale of the support for the Freedom Rally initiative. Premier Jason Kenney says he'll announce this coming week a date to cancel Alberta's COVID-19 vaccine passport. Kenney is quoted as saying the end will be in the very near future. A week ago, he said the passport could be eliminated by the end of March, but since then, Kenney has come under increasing pressure from members of his own United Conservative caucus to end the passport. Devin Dreeshen, who's the Innisfil-Sylvan Lake MLA, says he wants to see the COVID-19 vaccine mandates scrapped. MLA Dreeshen joined BCN's Hal Roberts from Innisfil, Alberta. Take a look.
Devin, why do you want to see the vaccine mandate come to an end?
Well, it's something that I've heard from my constituents in Innisfil-Sylvan Lake for a long time, that when it comes to COVID restrictions and COVID mandates, that their time has come and gone. And especially when you look at the restriction exemption program, that was brought in to boost vaccination rates months ago. And pretty much everybody in Alberta that wants to get vaccinated has been vaccinated. So really the time for that program to end is now. And I'll take the COVID Cabinet Committee at their word that they are looking at early next week to make that final decision to hopefully scrap that program altogether.
Now, you feel that many MLAs feel the same way. How can you really convince Premier Kenney that it's time?
Well, not to go into our caucus meetings, but it's been pretty vocal for quite some time that when it comes to the vaccine mandates and so many COVID restrictions, that really we wanted to see evidence of why they were being brought in. And then at the end of the day, we wanted to make sure that Albertans would buy into it, that they would actually see that this is actually something that would benefit them and to keep our healthcare system safe. And one of the greatest things that I heard from a constituent was when you look at not just Alberta, but other provinces, when it comes to the statement, we don't want to overwhelm our healthcare system, that was always the root cause and the root kind of genesis of all the government decisions during COVID. But there was never really a thought of how can we increase capacity.
The Freedom Convoy is having an effect on people of all ages, including high school students. On Friday, students at Lethbridge Collegiate Institute walked out of classes to hold signs in objection to mandates and restrictions and to show their support for the larger scale protests taking place across our country.
I'm doing this so that everyone here can get their voices heard. This isn't anti-mask, this is pro-choice. If you want to wear a mask and get vaccinated, I 100% support you. And anyone who doesn't and is getting forced into it, I think is disgusting, and we should all get the choice to choose for ourselves.
I'm one of the supporters of the truckers as well as a couple of my friends here, and I think it's really great kind of just that we're a small group, but we're here for everybody. do what we want to do. And if you want to get vaccinated, if you want to wear a mask, then that's you. Go you. I'm not going to be against you. That's your choice. But again, it's my choice not to.
Well, that was a very windy day for those kids. Up next, a car rams into at least 4 protesters in Winnipeg Friday night. We have more details after the break. Stay with us. Welcome back. Horns echoed throughout downtown Winnipeg last night and today as protesters against COVID-19 restrictions settled in for another day of demonstrations outside the Manitoba legislature. Organizer Rick Wall says the group is prepared for a long occupation of the area until they see public health measures lifted. Winnipeg Police Service Chief Danny Smythe says so far the protesters have been cooperative. Mayor Brian Bowman says local demonstrators are unlikely to change the city's COVID vaccine requirements. Well, we've obtained dash cam footage from Friday night in Winnipeg of the moment when what appears to be a white Jeep SUV attempted to pass a truck and drove into standing protesters. With the assistance of the RCMP, WPS officers were able to stop the vehicle in the 4800 block of Portage Avenue at approximately 10:30 p.m. The lone male driver was arrested after a brief struggle. The Winnipeg police issued a statement that 3 people were treated on site and one of the injured was sent to hospital. The driver of the vehicle is facing multiple charges after the incident. Bridge City News has a crew in Winnipeg covering the protest at the legislature. The Winnipeg Freedom Rally today is about unity and families coming together, calling on the Manitoba government to completely lift health mandates and restrictions. Here is what some in Manitoba are sharing with us.
I'm here for the younger generation that hasn't been able to experience being able to hang out with all their friends whenever they want and whoever they want without being vaccinated, and just to support them and want them to know that everybody supports them with what they want to do.
Right on. What would you like to see changed right now by the people that are in government?
I would really like to see them change the fact that we don't have to wear masks in school.
Right
and
on.
We get to participate in sports after school instead of just in gym.
Well, today is day 8 and we are continuing our coverage of the Freedom Convoy in Ottawa, and the crowds are gathering once again. David Craig is in our nation's capital and we wanted to bring you right into the thick of things to show you what it looked like just before noon today.
Hey, well, good morning, everyone. You guys are doing well. It's just before noon here in Ottawa. As you can see, these crowds are growing a lot right now. There's a band behind us. They're playing a bunch of worship tunes right now. Giant crowds gathering here at the nation's capital. Things are peaceful. Things are happy. Lots of families. Lots of people rejoicing and partying. Lots of different contingents going around here. It's a cold day, but the sun's out, so it feels really beautiful. It's going to be interesting to see how this weekend develops, but the mood around here is incredibly joyful. People are happy to be here. I'll give you a quick look to see what's going on.
Well, over the past week, we've been bringing you many accounts of what the Canadians who have made the trip to Ottawa have experienced and shared with David Craig and Jeremy Prest. One of the common themes that we continue to hear is unity. This next story from Friday night seemed to strike a chord with many who viewed it online. Here is a look back to Friday evening when BCN's video journalist David Craig met with Dustin Wiebe, who had made the trip from southern Manitoba to be a part of the convoy.
So there was a group of about 10 guys from Quebec that came to the truck, and I guess maybe one of them knew English, the rest were all French. And I told them when I saw Quebec was in trouble, that's when I jumped in my truck. Because in Quebec, you can't get groceries, you can't get a organ transplant, you can't go to the pharmacy if you don't have the vaccine. And when we saw that Quebec was in trouble, if Quebec goes down, Canada goes down. And these guys were getting hit hard. These guys, the one guy said, "Thank you, thank you, thank you." And they walked about 50 feet away, and then once the translation got back to French to the 10, They came in, they ran back to the truck and they started kissing me on the hand and they said, please, please, please don't leave. And they said, I will never, ever be a separatist again because of you. I will buy a Canadian flag the first time. I have never owned a Canadian flag, but because of you, I am Canadian today.
Wow, that's awesome. What part of Canada are you from?
Southern Manitoba.
So, what was the original reason why you came over here?
Because Quebec are fighters, but when they got hit the hardest and they got hit first, that's what's going to happen to the rest of us. If we would have waited 6 months to do this, it would have been too late.
It sure was. Up next, the issue is creating contention among many, including our provincial political leaders, and some are getting downright nasty with each other. Details after the break. Welcome back. Two local politicians went head-to-head this week in an online feud. Lethbridge West MLA Shannon Phillips spoke out against Lethbridge MP Rachel Thomas's stance on the Freedom Convoy in Ottawa following a post from Thomas saying she supports the truckers. In a post on Facebook, Phillips says Thomas is a disgrace to her office, adding that the MP just wants the pandemic to go on. Thomas was quick to respond, saying Phillips insists on perpetuating division and hate by painting a false narrative and using vile language to attack her. In a separate lengthy post on the MLA's Facebook page, Phillips wrote, quote, "It's clear to me that the hashtag Flu Trucks clan are unable to organize a protest, so let me help," adding that the truckers protesting should rally outside of her office downtown, but to make a stop outside of Thomas's office as well. Alberta Premier Jason Kenney spoke about the situation at the Coots border crossing. He's calling on Ottawa and Washington to implement the exemption for truckers once again so that they don't need to be jabbed crossing the border. Kenney says he sympathizes with the truckers. He also says he hopes to lift a number of COVID restrictions by the end of February, adding that the key is seeing a sustained decrease of the COVID cases in our hospitals and that our healthcare system is not overwhelmed.
We need to continue to be careful and mindful of the nurses and doctors and other frontline healthcare workers who continue to operate under real stress. Now, we continue to monitor these numbers very closely. As I've said before, once we begin to see a sustained reduction in COVID pressure on the hospitals, I am looking forward to being able to make decisions about moving towards relaxation of public health measures at that time. And I believe that will happen this month in February. We need to see a sustained decline in hospitalization pressure, but with the overall trends, I am very optimistic.
Turning our attention now to the disruption this week within the Conservative Party of Canada and the ousting of its leader, Erin O'Toole. Manitoba MP Candice Bergen has been chosen to become the interim leader of the Conservatives. Bergen was the deputy leader of the Tories under Erin O'Toole. O'Toole lost following a secret ballot where 73 of 118 MPs voted for a change in leadership. Lethbridge Conservative MP Rachel Thomas joined Hal Roberts from Ottawa to talk about the change.
Rachel, why do you think so many MPs wanted Erin O'Toole out as leader?
Well, Hal, I think ultimately our responsibility as members of Parliament is really to listen to the grassroots. And I think for a little while now, we've been receiving emails and telephone calls and having conversations with members who are a part of the Conservative movement. And they just have not been impressed with the leadership that Mr. O'Toole has offered. And, as members of Parliament, we have to take that to heart. And it's our responsibility to act on behalf of the grassroots. And we did.
So were you one of the 73 who voted for a change in leadership?
I did. Hal, I requested a change in leadership. I felt that was the will of my constituents, those that are a part of the Conservative Party of Canada in the constituency of Lethbridge, and so I felt that it was my responsibility to speak out on their behalf. And so I'm one of the 35 who signed the original letter, and I consequently did vote against keeping him as our leader.
So, Rachel, what kind of a leader does the party need now moving forward?
I think we need a leader who is going to unite caucus. We need to build bridges. One of our greatest strengths as a party is the fact that we are such a big tent party that covers the right side of the political spectrum. I personally feel that this is beautiful, that it is this amazing quality about conservatism that should be celebrated. As the Conservative Party of Canada, we have different viewpoints and we get to lean in and listen to those, and we get to, engage in robust discussion and try to persuade one another. And at the end of the day, sometimes we agree and sometimes we don't. And that's okay. But what matters is that we have one another's backs and that we gain a better understanding of the perspectives that exist within our caucus.
So let me ask you, will you be putting your name forward as a potential candidate now to lead the Conservative Party of Canada?
Hal, I will not be putting my name forward for leader.
What can Albertans expect in February? Well, after the break, we discuss Alberta's premier following Saskatchewan's lead of lifting all restrictions. Stay with us. Welcome back. Alberta Premier Jason Kenney was recently in the U.S. to increase trade opportunities between our province and certain states. Hal Roberts spoke with our legislative reporter and correspondent with the National Post about this, among other topics, like if Alberta will soon be restriction-free. Take a look.
Now, Tyler, our premier was in the United States recently talking to some of the governors about the vaccine mandate for the truckers. I mean, it expired, but then it was implemented again by the feds. Where did it actually go when Kenney talked to the governors when it comes to the truckers and this vaccine mandate?
Yeah, it's a little bit hard to say. So he was down at sort of an annual general meeting of governors. He'd been talking on the phone, apparently, with some of the sort of border governors over the last couple weeks about this issue. And they'd said, why don't you come down and talk to some of us? So he told the media that he had, a number of sort of formal sit downs with governors. He didn't specify who, and then a number of other conversations just sort of on the, margins of this conference. It's a little bit unclear where it goes next. He did say that some of the governors said this was the sort of thing they were going to raise with the Biden administration, because of course the Biden administration has a similar rule. So it's not just a Canadian law or rule, it's also an American one. So, there's sort of two governments to deal with here. So it's hard to say what will come of that. But it is, as I sort of mentioned before, a sign that the premier does sort of agree with at least this one portion of the protest movement and has actually been actively working to achieve what some of the protesters want.
Did Premier Kenney actually talk with the Biden administration while he was in Washington about the potential of bringing back Keystone XL?
I'm sure it came up in his conversations. I don't know if they've had any direct conversations with the Biden administration about it. We do have sort of a trade mission in Washington that I'm sure is doing some of this lobbying here and there. And honestly, and we haven't heard very much about it on the federal level either, which is maybe where you'd expect some of these sort of bilateral discussions to happen. It seems like for now, though, that the pipeline is sort of dead in the water. Of course, if anyone ever decides to start it up, I don't think the link up section that needs to be completed is all that big. So it probably wouldn't take, an enormous amount of effort to get the project restarted. But of course, it's in limbo, and there's they had to dismantle portions of it and all that. So it seems like, as far as I can tell, it's sort of an Energy East situation where the idea exists, but the project itself is pretty thoroughly scrapped.
What's interesting is how the Biden administration has been asking OPEC to increase output. And it's like, hey, Canada, right here, your neighbors, we've got the oil that you guys need. We've got the fuels. So I don't know. We'll see what happens. We'll keep an eye on that. Now, Tyler, Premier Kenney says by the end of this month, Alberta will begin dropping some of the COVID-19 related public health measures, including the vaccine passport system.
Yeah, it's a little bit confusing, I have to say, because a few days ago he said by the end of March, and then on Tuesday he said sort of end of February. So let's say, generously timeline anywhere from the next 4 to 8 weeks, perhaps we might see the relaxation of some of these things. And the vaccine passport, as you say, did get a specific mention there. So the metrics aren't there yet. Hospitalization rates are still at sort of record highs. We're not through this yet, even if it perhaps feels like it for a lot of people. So nothing sort of imminent. And he was really pressed by some reporters on Tuesday about a roadmap. When is this going to happen? What is it going to look like? What are the benchmarks? And he did promise that was coming, but no, straightforward, explicit announcement of those things. And the other thing to keep in mind, of course, is that this is going to become a major political issue for him when he decides to do that. Obviously his supporters are probably going to like it. The New Democrats are going to be, screaming bloody murder about it. So once the legislature is back in session, everyone's, shouting at each other in question period. I have no doubt we're going to hear an awful lot about this in the weeks and months to come.
Saskatchewan Premier Scott Moe was talking about it's not a matter of if, but when they're going to lift all of the mandates as well here and try and get back to normal. Moe was saying that this is COVID, it's just something we're going to have to learn to live with. Is that kind of the same mindset with Premier Jason Kenney in the UCP?
I think that's probably fair to say. That was one of the things that they tried to do back in August, I guess it would have been, trying to move from this pandemic to endemic management. And then, of course, the whole thing was sidelined by the Delta wave and the plan was sort of, I don't want to say scrapped, but, sidelined for the time being. But certainly I think that's the way it's going. And, it's not just Saskatchewan that's looked at opening up. Ontario opened up some of its facilities, bars and restaurants, I think, that have been closed for a considerable period of time. Earlier this week, Monday, I think. I've been thinking about this a lot, Hal, and so I'll maybe just mention it. It's very interesting because Alberta's oddly had it easier than almost everywhere else in the country in terms of restrictions. And it doesn't feel like that, I think, for a lot of people, but it's when you look at Ontario and Quebec, it's just a completely different world,
When we return from the break, we share our top local stories from the past week. If you're watching us on YouTube, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for all of our latest videos. And please follow Bridge City News on Twitter. Stay tuned. We'll be right back. Welcome back. RCMP continued to investigate a fatal motor vehicle collision that happened shortly before 8 a.m. Friday. Picture Butte RCMP responded to the scene on Highway 25 just south of Diamond City. According to police, a car traveling eastbound on Highway 25 collided with a westbound SUV. The male driver of the car and lone occupant was pronounced deceased at the scene. The lone driver of the SUV has been transported to hospital with what are reported as non-life-threatening injuries. Icy road conditions are believed to have been contributed to the collision. It's been exactly 103 days since Blaine Higgin was elected as mayor of Lethbridge. Since being sworn in, Higgin says it's been a great honor and privilege to serve as mayor. He says the biggest accomplishment so far has been creating the Gateway to Opportunity 2022 action plan with the help of council.
Everything we seem to discuss on a regular basis falls back into that action plan, and it's great. So we try to fit any questions or any comments or concerns or suggestions that come in from the community. We take those and how does it fit in with that action plan, and all of it does. And so it's, I think, sitting together and working out that action plan, and it took a long time. We were thinking maybe we'd have it out in early December, later in December, and then finally in January we brought that out. It's we wanted to make sure that it was the best that we could put out there.
Higgins says they want to continue conversations with different groups and ministries and work on issues they weren't able to complete within the first 100 days in office. Members of the Lethbridge Police Service attended a public hearing Wednesday afternoon regarding Sergeant Jason Moulton of the LPS. He faces charges relating to the meme gate scandal that has plagued the LPS for the past year or so. The matter has now been adjourned for 3 weeks. 2 LPS constables provided evidence against Moulton in relation to the memes that were shared against upper management within the Lethbridge Police Service. Moulton pleaded not guilty last November, along with guilty pleas to 5 additional counts of misconduct. Matters have already been concluded for the 4 other officers involved. 2 constables who pleaded guilty to 2 counts of discreditable conduct and 1 count each of insubordination and neglect of duty in November 2021 were demoted within rank by 2 grades for 1 year. 2 additional constables resigned in November of 2021. 5 people have been charged and more than $1.6 million in drugs were seized following a massive drug bust spanning across a number of Western provinces. Alert and RCMP say their 18-month investigation revealed that the drug trafficking network had its origins in BC's Lower Mainland, Calgary, Edmonton, Medicine Hat, Saskatoon, and Winnipeg. Outside of fentanyl, methamphetamine, and cocaine, police also confiscated 11 firearms and $82,000 in cash.
This investigation highlights the importance of the ALERT program and how tackling regional issues can have significant effects on many different communities. Our city has experienced the devastating impact caused by the opioid epidemic. Whether through large investigations like this one or smaller local files, we remain committed to continuing our efforts to identify and hold those responsible accountable for their actions for causing this community harm.
42-year-old Matthew Edwards, 27-year-old Kevin Hind, and 25-year-old Carvin Sandhu, all of Calgary, were charged along with 34-year-old Ada Wahid Shika from Fort St. John, BC. The 4 men face a total of 37 charges. A warrant has also been issued for 40-year-old Dylan Berge from Calgary. A Medicine Hat barber is giving the gift of a fresh buzz cut to the truckers in Ottawa. Calvin Isaac Malton, owner of Isaac Barber Shop, will be heading to our nation's capital, where he plans to give haircuts to anyone in the Freedom Convoy who needs.
I believe in democracy, freedom, and all-encompassing facts and science that illustrates duality between our nation. That is Canada, and it's been unified so beautifully by the convoy to desecrate the segregation that has occurred, and I just democracy, and so I want to give my gift to the truckers, make them look good, feel good, do good.
There will be more Bridge City News after the break. When we return with my interview with the Lethbridge County Reeve, we discuss the possibility of a provincial police force and what this could mean for Albertans. Keep it right here. Thanks for watching Bridge City News this weekend.